and must remain constant. The role and the duties of monarchy also remain, as does the sovereign's particular relationship and responsibility towards the Church of England.
The royal family will never recover from this betrayal. When Queen Camilla secretly moved Queen Elizabeth's priceless jewelry, she had no idea King Charles would find out. What he did next absolutely destroyed the monarchy. You won't believe who was behind the shocking theft that rocked Buckingham Palace to its core. The truth will leave you speechless. The personal belongings of the late queen, carefully cataloged and secured according to centuries-old tradition. Her jewelry, private papers, handwritten letters, and precious heirlooms, all locked away under the strictest security measures.
This is definitely true of our wonderful finalists. Thank you for your talents. Your readers are taken on amazing journeys with you across the Commonwealth, from Gambia to Grenada, from Bangladesh to Botswana.
Royal protocol dictates that such items must remain sealed for nearly a century, held in trust as both historical treasures and sovereign property. The Royal Collection Trust, working alongside palace officials, ensures these items remain untouched, protecting the late monarch's legacy from any claims or public access until the designated time arrives. The treasury containing Queen Elizabeth's most personal possessions should remain sealed until sometime in the 2120s. Yet in this imagined story, everything changes when the royal treasurer discovers that several irreplaceable items have simply vanished. Treasurer Donald Walton, a man who has served the crown faithfully for decades. He arrives unannounced at Buckingham Palace on this quiet Wednesday morning, carrying a report that would send shockwaves through the royal household. According to his careful inventory, several of the Queen's most cherished possessions are missing from what should be an impenetrable vault. Among the missing items would be pieces of immense sentimental and historical value. Imagine if the sapphire Jubilee brooch, the one the Queen might have worn during her 65th year on the throne, had disappeared. Picture the distress if her iconic double-strand pearl necklace, possibly worn at Princess Diana's funeral in 1997, was nowhere to be found. Most disturbing of all in this imagined crisis would be the disappearance of handwritten journals, private thoughts the Queen might have penned during the darkest days of the COVID-19 lockdowns, including perhaps final letters intended for her heirs. These would be irreplaceable links to history, personal artifacts that connect the present monarchy to its past. The emotional weight of such a loss, combined with the security implications, would create a perfect storm of crisis management. When this devastating report reaches Prince William and Princess Anne, the palace atmosphere transforms instantly. Gone would be the usual calm efficiency, replaced by an urgent need for answers and action. This wouldn't be simply a case of misplaced items or clerical error. This would represent a fundamental breach of trust, a violation of the sacred duty to preserve royal heritage. William and Anne would likely summon the treasurer to a secure briefing chamber, perhaps the same room used for sensitive state business. Picture Anne, known for her no-nonsense approach, getting straight to the point. Her questions would be direct and unforgiving. How long had these items been under his supervision? When was the last confirmed sighting? What security measures were in place? Clearly shaken by the implications, he insisted that everything had been properly sealed and logged. Nothing should have moved. The security protocols had been followed to the letter. Yet somehow, 3 of the Queen's most personal treasures had vanished without explanation. William would lean forward with the gravity of someone who understands the full implications. These aren't just valuable objects we're talking about. They're pieces of his grandmother's life, tangible connections to a woman who dedicated her entire existence to service and duty. The violation would feel deeply personal, while carrying enormous public implications. The treasurer's response would be everything you'd expect from a loyal servant of the crown. He would swear on everything he holds dear that he had no knowledge of how this happened. He would promise to do whatever it takes to find the person responsible, calling it an affront not just to the royal family, but to everyone who serves the institution. It would be a decent, heartfelt response, but in the rarefied atmosphere of Buckingham Palace, decent wouldn't be nearly enough. When news reaches King Charles in his private study, imagine his reaction. Picture him rising slowly from his leather armchair, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. His face might be pale, but there would be steel in his voice as he grasps the full magnitude of what's at stake. This wouldn't be about trinkets or even priceless artifacts. This would be about his mother's legacy and, by extension, his own. Charles would summon the treasurer once more, this time to his most private quarters. The conversation would be brief, but loaded with meaning. The king would make it clear that any attempt to hide, minimize, or politicize this matter would be considered an act of betrayal. The instruction would be simple but profound. Find who did this and do it quickly. Still unsatisfied with conventional approaches, Charles would take the extraordinary step of calling a private council. Picture the scene. Exactly 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 of the most senior royals gathering in what palace staff might call the war room. Prince William, Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Queen Camilla, surrounded by only the most trusted staff members, all sworn to absolute secrecy. The meeting would begin with Charles laying out the facts in stark terms. The Queen's private possessions had been tampered with, and he wanted answers from the family, not from the press or external investigators. The silence that would follow such an announcement would be thick with implications and unspoken concerns. It would challenge the very foundations of trust that hold the monarchy together. Every person with access becomes a potential suspect. Every protocol must be questioned. Every relationship within the royal household would be viewed through a new lens of suspicion and doubt. The psychological impact on the family would be immense. These wouldn't just be valuable objects that belonged to Queen Elizabeth. They would be tangible pieces of memory, physical connections to a woman who shaped their lives and defined their purpose. The violation would cut deep, touching on issues of legacy, respect, and the sacred trust between generations. The pressure would begin building immediately. This wouldn't be the kind of problem that could be solved quietly or ignored until it goes away. Royal watchers, media outlets, and the public would demand answers. The integrity of the institution would be at stake, and everyone involved would know that failure to resolve this crisis quickly and decisively could have lasting consequences for the monarchy's reputation. In this imagined scenario, the stage would be set for an investigation that would test every relationship, challenge every assumption, and ultimately reveal truths that no one was prepared to face. The missing jewelry would be just the beginning of a story that would shake the royal family to its core and force them to confront uncomfortable questions about loyalty, trust, and the price of power. When devastating news reaches the highest levels of power, the response often reveals more about character than years of public appearances ever could. Imagine King Charles receiving word of the missing royal treasures in the quiet sanctuary of his private study. Picture him processing not just the immediate crisis, but the deeper implications for everything he represents. The transformation would be immediate and striking. Gone would be any trace of the comfortable routine that defines royal life. In its place would emerge the steel resolve of a man who understands that his mother's legacy, and indeed his own legitimacy, hangs in the balance. This wouldn't be about material objects, regardless of their value. This would be about the sacred trust between the crown and the people, a bond that has survived centuries of challenges, but could be shattered by a single scandal. Charles would shed the blanket that had been draped across his knees, rising from his leather armchair, with the deliberate movements of someone who has just accepted an enormous burden. His aide would witness a transformation, seeing not the king at rest, but the monarch in crisis mode. The words that would follow would be measured but loaded with meaning. This is no longer about trinkets, but about legacy itself. Picture Charles in his private quarters, the most secure and intimate space in his world, delivering an ultimatum that would define how this investigation proceeds. The message would be crystal clear. Any attempt to hide, soften, or politicize this matter would be considered an act of betrayal. The instruction to find the responsible party quickly would carry the full weight of royal authority. Yet even this direct action wouldn't satisfy a king grappling with such a fundamental breach of trust. Charles would take the extraordinary step of calling a private council, something reserved for only the most serious matters of state. The timing would be precise. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when the palace settles into its quieter rhythms and sensitive conversations can take place without unwanted attention. Picture the scene as 4 of the most senior royals gather in what staff might call the royal war room. Prince William, carrying the weight of being heir to the throne. Princess Anne, known for her practical approach and unwavering loyalty to royal duty. Prince Edward, often overlooked but possessing deep institutional knowledge. And Queen Camilla, still relatively new to the inner circle of royal decision-making, but now facing her first major crisis as queen consort. The security arrangements for this meeting would be extraordinary, even by royal standards. Only the most trusted staff members would be permitted within earshot, and even they would be sworn to absolute secrecy. The room itself would be chosen for its security features, perhaps the same space used during international crises or sensitive state business. Every precaution would be taken to ensure that what happens in this room stays contained. Charles would begin the meeting with characteristic directness, laying out the facts in stark terms. The Queen's private possessions have been tampered with, and he wants answers from the family, not from external sources. The weight of this statement would settle over the room like a heavy fog. Everyone present would understand immediately that they're not just discussing missing objects, but potential betrayal from within their own ranks. The silence that follows such an announcement would be thick with implications. Each person in the room would be processing not just the immediate crisis, but what it means for their relationships with each other. Trust, the foundation of any family, but especially crucial for a royal family under constant scrutiny, would suddenly become a luxury they can no longer afford. Camilla would be the first to break this uncomfortable silence. Picture her, seated to the king's right in a position that reflects her status as queen consort, offering what seems like a reasonable suggestion. Perhaps they should start by examining the treasury operation itself. Has anyone considered that the treasurer might have had help, or even personal motives for the theft? This suggestion would cut through the room like a blade. Edward's reaction would be immediate and telling, his surprise evident as he questions whether she's actually suggesting the treasurer stole the items. Camilla's response would be measured but pointed. These things don't simply vanish into thin air. Someone had to take them, and they should consider all possibilities, no matter how uncomfortable. William's agreement with this line of thinking would add weight to the suggestion. He would recognize the logic in not ruling out any angle, even one that implicates a trusted servant. The possibility that the treasurer wasn't acting alone would open up even more disturbing scenarios. If he had accomplices, how deep does this conspiracy go? How many people within the royal household might be involved? Charles's reaction to this discussion would reveal the depth of his concern. Picture him tapping his fingers on the polished oak table, a nervous habit that emerges only during moments of extreme stress. The idea of interrogating the royal treasurer publicly would represent a significant escalation, one with potentially serious consequences for palace morale and public perception. But it would be Anne who raises the most compelling objection to this approach. Her voice would carry the authority of someone who has seen decades of royal crisis management. She would remind everyone of past incidents where false accusations against loyal staff members have caused lasting damage. The reference to a specific case from 1989, perhaps involving someone called Margaret Stafer, would serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of internal witch hunts. Her argument would be powerful. No one in the royal household would dare take so much as a pin from the Queen's collection. The loyalty of these staff members has been tested over years, sometimes decades, of faithful service. To suddenly turn them into suspects would represent a fundamental betrayal of the trust that makes the royal household function. Edward would support this position, adding his own concerns about the potential for leaks. If they start making accusations against their own staff and word gets out, it would create a media firestorm that could overshadow the original crisis. The public loves nothing more than stories of royal family dysfunction and internal conflict. Giving them such material would be like throwing gasoline on an already dangerous fire. The tension in the room would be palpable as these competing viewpoints clash. On one side, the practical need to investigate every possibility, no matter how uncomfortable. On the other, the recognition that their actions could cause irreparable damage to the relationships and trust that hold the royal household together. After what would feel like an eternity of debate, Charles would make a decision that reflects both his royal authority and his understanding of the delicate balances involved. The compromise would be elegant in its complexity. Allow the Treasury to conduct its own internal investigation quietly, while simultaneously launching a separate inquiry under direct royal authority. This parallel investigation would report only to the king, ensuring that sensitive information stays contained while still pursuing every possible lead. The decision to keep this second investigation secret from everyone outside the room would represent a significant escalation in the crisis management approach. No longer would they be relying solely on established protocols and trusted institutions. Instead, they would be taking matters into their own hands, accepting the risks that come with such direct involvement. What began as a straightforward case of missing items has now evolved into something far more complex and dangerous. The royal family would no longer be simply victims of a crime, but active participants in an investigation that could expose uncomfortable truths about their own institution. The weight of these decisions would be enormous. Every choice made in this room could have far-reaching consequences, not just for the investigation itself, but for the relationships between family members and their understanding of who can be trusted. The missing jewelry has become a catalyst for examining every aspect of how the royal household functions and who really has the power to influence events behind the scenes. In the modern age of instant communication and social media, few secrets can remain hidden for long, especially when they involve the royal family. What started as a carefully contained palace crisis would explode into a full-blown media sensation that would consume public attention across Britain and beyond. Picture the scene: Thursday morning, May 5th, 2025. News outlets across the United Kingdom would wake up to one of the biggest royal stories in years. Headlines would scream across newspaper front pages and dominate television broadcasts. Royal heirlooms missing, palace in crisis, Queen Elizabeth's treasures gone, Buckingham mum, where are the jewels and who took them? The story would have everything that captures public imagination: mystery, scandal, and the possibility of betrayal within the most famous family in the world. The internet, as it always does in moments of crisis, would become a breeding ground for speculation and conspiracy theories. Within hours of the first reports breaking, social media platforms would be flooded with amateur detectives offering their theories about what really happened. Was this an inside job orchestrated by someone with intimate knowledge of palace security? Could it be a political distraction designed to deflect attention from other issues? Or worse still, was there a deliberate cover-up happening behind palace walls? The appetite for answers would be insatiable. Every royal watcher, casual observer, and conspiracy theorist would have an opinion about who might be responsible and why. The comment sections of news articles would be filled with heated debates, wild accusations, and increasingly elaborate theories about palace intrigue. The story would have all the elements of a perfect scandal: beloved figures from the past, current family drama, and the tantalizing possibility that nothing is quite what it seems. The pressure on palace officials would become overwhelming almost immediately. Donald Walton, suddenly thrust into the spotlight as the face of this crisis. Within a single morning, he would find himself holding 7 different press briefings, each one more desperate and less convincing than the last. His tone would evolve throughout the day, starting with professional confidence, but gradually shifting to defensiveness as reporters pressed him with increasingly pointed questions. The media would smell blood in the water. Experienced royal correspondents would know exactly which questions to ask to expose any inconsistencies in the official story. They would probe every detail of the security arrangements, question every aspect of the investigation, and challenge every reassurance that the situation is under control. With each briefing, Walton would appear more flustered and less credible, his explanations becoming increasingly hollow as journalists refused to accept his assurances. The breaking point would come when his responses begin to sound rehearsed and empty, devoid of the specific details that would make his account believable. Reporters, trained to spot evasion and misdirection, would pounce on every hesitation, every vague answer, every attempt to deflect their questions. Soon, they would stop believing him altogether, and some might even begin to mock his inability to provide satisfactory answers. The headlines would become increasingly brutal as the day progresses. "The man can't even secure a brooch," one particularly harsh newspaper might declare, turning Walton into a symbol of palace incompetence. Social media would amplify these attacks, with memes and jokes spreading faster than the original news story. The human cost of this media frenzy would be enormous, as a career civil servant finds himself becoming the public face of a scandal he never created. Recognizing that the narrative was spiraling out of control, the royal family would make a strategic decision to deploy their most effective public spokesperson. Prince William would step forward to address the crisis, appearing before cameras outside Clarence's house, with the composed authority that comes naturally to someone trained for public life since childhood. His statement would be carefully crafted to project both confidence and determination, while revealing as little as possible about the ongoing investigation. Standing straight and speaking clearly, he would deliver words designed to reassure the public without compromising the search for answers. "The matter is under full investigation by internal and external royal authorities," he might say. "The individual responsible will be identified and apprehended. The legacy of Her Majesty will be protected at all costs." The performance would be textbook crisis management. William would bow respectfully to the assembled media and then leave without taking questions, denying reporters the opportunity to probe deeper into the story or catch him off guard with unexpected inquiries. It would be dignified, controlled, and completely unsatisfying to a press corps hungry for details and drama. But dignity and control, however expertly displayed, wouldn't be what the public craves in a moment like this. The modern media landscape thrives on conflict, revelation, and human drama. People don't want carefully worded statements from palace officials. They want names, faces, and someone to blame for violating the memory of a beloved queen. William's measured response, while professionally executed, would only fuel more speculation about what the royal family might be hiding. Behind the palace walls, the pressure would continue to mount with each passing hour. The 10-day deadline that King Charles had established for preliminary findings would loom large in everyone's minds. 3 crucial days have already passed, leaving just 7 more for investigators to produce answers. Every hour that passes without progress would increase the likelihood that this story spins completely out of control. The royal treasurer, despite his public humiliation, would be working frantically behind the scenes to solve the mystery that has consumed his life. Picture him going through every page of the Treasury's entry logs and inventory records, searching desperately for any clue that might explain how the items disappeared. Every document would be scrutinized, every entry double-checked, every signature verified. But the paperwork would tell a frustrating story. Everything appears perfect on paper, exactly as it should be. This would be perhaps the most maddening aspect of the entire investigation. According to all official records, nothing irregular had occurred. No unauthorized entries, no missing signatures, no unexplained gaps in the security logs. The system appears to have worked exactly as designed, and yet 3 irreplaceable items from Queen Elizabeth's personal collection have simply vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, Sir Clement Mallister, Chief Royal Security Director, would be conducting his own parallel investigation with the thoroughness that comes from decades of intelligence work. Picture him systematically interrogating every person who had any access to the Royal Treasury floor. Guards, clerks, assistants, maintenance workers, everyone who might have had even the slightest opportunity to breach the vault would face his scrutiny. But this investigation would prove equally frustrating. Every interview would yield the same result: Nothing suspicious, nothing unusual, no red flags or concerning behavior. The security systems would show no signs of tampering. No breach alarms had been triggered, no equipment malfunctions recorded, no unexpected access attempts logged. The palace's security infrastructure, designed to be virtually impenetrable, would appear to have functioned flawlessly throughout the relevant period. The psychological toll of this investigation would be enormous for everyone involved. Every member of the royal household would find themselves under suspicion, their loyalty questioned, their every action scrutinized. Friendships and working relationships built over years or even decades would strain under the weight of mutual suspicion. The very trust that makes palace life possible would begin to erode as people start to wonder who among them might be capable of such a betrayal. For the investigators, the lack of progress would be professionally and personally devastating. These are people accustomed to solving problems, finding answers, and maintaining the smooth operation of one of the world's most complex institutions. Their inability to identify even a single viable suspect or credible lead would represent a failure that goes to the core of their professional identity. Sometimes the most significant breakthroughs come not from brilliant detective work or advanced technology, but from the persistence of someone willing to look at familiar information with fresh eyes. It has been exactly 7 days since the investigation began, and the pressure on everyone involved has reached a breaking point. Picture Sir Clement Mallister in his glass-walled office at the back of the East Wing as evening settles over Buckingham Palace. The sun would be bleeding through the windows, casting long shadows across the case files that have consumed his every waking moment for the past week. He would be staring at the same documents, the same witness statements, the same security logs that have yielded nothing but frustration and dead ends. Clement would be facing the most challenging investigation of his distinguished career. Every conventional approach has failed. Every lead has evaporated under scrutiny. Every suspect has been eliminated through solid alibis and verified whereabouts. The weight of failure would be crushing for someone accustomed to solving complex security issues and protecting the royal family from harm. Just as he prepares to close up for another fruitless day, Clement would make a decision that speaks to his desperation and determination. Rather than accepting defeat, he would buzz his team of 7 investigators, summoning them for one final push. "Everyone meet me in the archive hall in 20 minutes, he might say into the communication system. "We're not going home until we have a lead." The archive hall would be a windowless basement chamber beneath Buckingham Palace, a long concrete room lined with steel cabinets and security monitors. It would be the kind of space designed for serious, concentrated work, free from distractions and interruptions. The team would gather there with boxes of documents, laptops, and the grim determination of professionals who understand that their reputations are on the line. Picture the scene as they methodically review every piece of evidence once again. Entry sheets would be spread across tables, duty logs examined line by line, shift reports scrutinized for any detail that might have been overlooked. The atmosphere would be tense with the kind of focused energy that comes from desperation, mixed with professional pride. These investigators would know that if they can't find answers soon, the entire case might remain forever unsolved. For hours, the work would continue in relative silence, broken only by occasional questions or requests for clarification. Each team member would be assigned specific areas to review, ensuring that no document goes unexamined and no detail remains unexplored. The methodical nature of this review would be both necessary and mind-numbing, requiring the kind of attention to detail that can easily lead to overlooked clues. Then at 2:03 in the morning, something would shift. A rookie investigator named Donna would be sitting cross-legged on the floor, her laptop balanced on her knees, working through digital copies of security logs. She would be tired, probably questioning whether she's cut out for this kind of high-pressure work, when she notices something that doesn't quite fit the pattern. "Wait, this doesn't line up," she might whisper, more to herself than to anyone else. But as she examines the discrepancy more closely, her voice would grow more urgent. She would stand up, then actually run across the room to where Clement is working. "You're going to want to see this," she would call out. her excitement cutting through the exhaustion that has settled over the team. The discovery would be elegantly simple in its significance. Among all the security logs and duty rosters, there would be one entry that breaks the established pattern. A guard named Robert Halton had clocked in at 3:49 in the morning on April 27, 2025, but his shift wasn't supposed to begin until 6:00 a.m. More importantly, there would be no corresponding logout time, no follow-up entry, no explanatory notation to account for this unusual early arrival. This might seem like a minor administrative oversight, but to experienced investigators, it would represent exactly the kind of anomaly that can crack open an entire case. Why would a guard report for duty more than 2 hours early? Why was there no record of what he did during that time? And why was there no proper closing entry when his shift ended? Clement's reaction to this discovery would be immediate and intense. After days of finding nothing, suddenly there would be a concrete lead, a specific person to focus on, a clear deviation from normal protocol that demands explanation. Has he been questioned? Would be his first logical inquiry, followed by a quick check of the interview records. The team would confirm that Robert Halton had indeed been part of the initial round of interviews. He had been asked standard questions about his duties, his knowledge of the missing items, and whether he had observed anything unusual during his shifts. According to the interview notes, he had appeared cooperative and forthcoming, providing answers that raised no red flags. He had passed his background security check without any issues, and his record showed nothing that would suggest he posed a risk to palace security. But now, with this new information about his unexplained early arrival, everything about Robert Halton would need to be reconsidered. What had seemed like routine cooperation might actually have been careful misdirection. His clean record, rather than proving his innocence, might simply demonstrate how well he had covered his tracks. "Then we missed something," Clement would mutter, the frustration of the past week crystallizing into focused determination. The instruction to wake everyone up would signal a new phase in the investigation, one driven by concrete evidence rather than speculation and guesswork. The investigation would shift into high gear. Clement's first call would be to Donald Walton, the royal treasurer who has become the public face of this crisis. "I need the full profile and contact file for Robert Halton," he would request, his tone carrying new urgency and purpose. The response would be immediate and professional. "Halton," Donald would repeat, quickly accessing the personnel records. "Of course, just give me a moment." Within minutes, he would provide the basic information. Robert Halton, 10 years of faithful service, clean disciplinary record, no previous incidents or concerns. But when asked why this information is needed, Clement would be deliberately vague. "He's being summoned for questioning this morning." The decision not to notify Halton in advance would be strategic and telling. Rather than giving him time to prepare answers or coordinate with potential accomplices, the investigators would want to catch him off guard, to see his natural reaction to unexpected questions about his activities on that crucial morning. Halton would find himself in a bare interrogation room, sitting across from Clement and Donna, with only a single recording device between them. The setting would be deliberately austere, designed to create psychological pressure and encourage honesty through discomfort and isolation. Clement's opening question would be direct and specific. Rather than starting with general inquiries about his duties or observations, he would immediately focus on the anomaly they had discovered. "We've reviewed your entry logs. Tell us what happened on the morning of April 27th. You reported for duty nearly 2 hours early." The reaction would be immediate and telling. Halton's eyes would dart, his body language would shift, and he would visibly struggle to formulate a response. These physical signs of distress would be exactly what experienced investigators look for when they know they're on to something significant. His explanation would be weak and unconvincing. Claiming that he was just early and decided to walk the halls and do his rounds would sound reasonable on the surface, but it would fail to account for why he didn't follow proper protocol by logging his activities. When pressed about filing a report, his excuse about being tired and forgetting would ring hollow for someone with 10 years of experience in royal security. The moment when someone finally breaks under pressure and reveals the truth, can be both shocking and anticlimactic. Robert Halton's confession would shatter every assumption the investigators had made about this case. His words, delivered with a voice cracking under emotional strain, would reveal a conspiracy far more complex and disturbing than anyone had imagined. "I didn't know what I was doing was wrong," he might say, the weight of his actions finally crushing his ability to maintain the deception. "I was told it was from the crown. I swear on my wife's treatment I would never have done it otherwise." These words would hang in the air of that bare interrogation room, transforming everything the investigators thought they understood about the case. The revelation that Halton believed he was following official orders would be devastating in its implications. This wouldn't be a simple case of theft motivated by greed or desperation. Instead, it would suggest a deliberate manipulation of a loyal employee, someone who had served the royal family faithfully for a decade only to be turned into an unwitting accomplice in violating everything he had sworn to protect. Clement's response would be measured but intense. "You were told by whom?" would be the obvious next question. But Halton's answer would only deepen the mystery. He would claim to have received an anonymous phone call, someone who knew intimate details about his life, but provided no name or clear identification. The caller had somehow known his shift schedule, his personal circumstances, even details about his daughter's school and his wife's medical condition. The story Halton would tell would be both heartbreaking and terrifying. Picture a man facing his wife's cancer diagnosis, watching their savings disappear into medical bills, desperate for any way to provide the treatment she needs. Then imagine receiving a call offering exactly the money required, presented as an official royal instruction that would help his family while serving the crown. For someone in his position, the temptation would be overwhelming. But the most disturbing aspect of his confession would be the sophistication of the manipulation. Whoever orchestrated this scheme had done their homework, gathering personal information that would make their offer irresistible, while providing just enough official-sounding authority to make it seem legitimate. They had turned Halton's loyalty to the royal family into a weapon against the institution he served. When asked about identifying details from the mysterious caller, Halton would provide the one clue that would crack the case wide open. While no name was given, he would remember being provided with a specific number to call if he had questions. That number, logged in his phone records from April 27th at 3:22 a.m., would become the key to unraveling the entire conspiracy. Picture Clement and Donna exchanging glances before making the call, understanding that they're about to confront whoever orchestrated this elaborate scheme. When a young female voice answers, calm and controlled, the investigators would know they're dealing with someone who has been expecting this moment. Clement's identification of himself as chief security officer would be met with silence, then the unmistakable sound of a call being terminated. But in today's world of digital tracking and GPS technology, ending a call doesn't end an investigation. Within minutes, Donna would have traced the signal, and the results would send shockwaves through everyone involved in the case. The call would be traced to a location within Buckingham Palace itself. This revelation would transform the entire nature of the investigation. No longer would they be looking for an external threat or an opportunistic insider. Instead, they would be facing the terrifying reality that someone with legitimate access to the palace had orchestrated this entire scheme from within the heart of the royal household. The implications would be staggering. Someone with enough knowledge and authority to manipulate security protocols, someone with access to personal information about staff members, someone who could make convincing claims about royal authorization, had turned against the very institution they were supposed to protect. The breach of trust would go far beyond the theft of jewelry to strike at the fundamental assumptions about loyalty and security that make royal life possible. Clement would understand immediately that this discovery elevates the case beyond his authority to handle alone. This wouldn't be a matter for security personnel or palace administrators. This would require the direct attention of the king himself, and the conversation that follows would be one of the most difficult in modern royal history. Clement would find himself standing before King Charles in his private study, carrying information that would shake the monarchy to its core. The king's study would provide an intimate setting for devastating news, a space where the crown's most sensitive business is conducted away from public view and media scrutiny. Charles's question would be simple and direct: "What have you found?" But the answer would be anything but simple. Clement would methodically walk through the investigation, from the discovery of Halton's irregular schedule to the revelation about the phone call, and finally to the shocking truth that the conspiracy originated from within the palace walls. The king's reaction would be a study in controlled devastation. The freezing of his expression, the clenching of his jaw, these physical responses would reveal the depth of his shock and anger. When he asks for confirmation, his voice would carry the weight of someone hoping against hope that there might be some mistake, some other explanation for what he's hearing. But there would be no mistake, no alternative explanation. The evidence would be clear and undeniable. Someone with access to Buckingham Palace had orchestrated the theft of his mother's most precious possessions, using manipulation and deception to turn a loyal employee into an unwitting accomplice. The king's decision to keep this information secret, at least temporarily, would reflect both his understanding of the explosive nature of the revelation and his need to control how the truth emerges. The suggestion for a different investigative approach using trusted palace maids would represent a desperate attempt to identify the perpetrator without triggering a media firestorm that could destroy the monarchy's reputation. Picture the king himself addressing the palace's most trusted servants, appealing not just to their loyalty, but to their love for Queen Elizabeth's memory. His words would carry the weight of genuine grief and desperate hope that one of them might hold the key to restoring his mother's legacy. The search would be conducted with the precision and discretion that only comes from years of service in the royal household. Each trusted employee would move through their assigned areas like shadows, understanding that they're participating in something far more significant than routine cleaning or maintenance. For 2 days, they would search every corner, every drawer, every possible hiding place, treating the task as a sacred mission. The breakthrough would come on Sunday evening, May 14th, when one of Camilla's personal maids makes a discovery that changes everything. Finding the sapphire jubilee brooch in a child's jewelry box would be both shocking and heartbreaking, implicating someone who should have been above suspicion, while involving an innocent family member in the scandal. The confrontation that follows would represent the climax of the crisis. Picture Camilla entering that private chamber, dressed elegantly but unprepared for the devastating evidence that awaits her. The brooch on its velvet tray would speak louder than any accusation, a physical manifestation of betrayal that cannot be explained away or denied. Her initial response of calling the situation absurd would ring hollow in the face of such concrete evidence. The attempt to frame it as a political setup would represent a desperate attempt to deflect responsibility, but the evidence would be too precise, the trail too clear for such explanations to hold credibility.